remembering Steve Jobs at his best.
The world pays tribute to a visionary.
Hello, it is 3 a.m. at Apple headquarters in Cupertino in California. I'm Monita, Rajpal.
And I'm Zain, Verjee. You're watching CNN, the world's news leader, and this is World One live from London. Also ahead,
from world leaders to Generation Y, tributes are pouring in from around the globe for a man praised for his ability to transform the way we think.
One of the greatest American innovators, the words of U.S. President Barack Obama as he led tributes for Steve Jobs, the co-founder of Apple, who's died at age 56. Jobs passed away in California late on Wednesday. Apple said, "We have lost a visionary and a creative genius, a dear friend and an inspiring mentor." One young person told CNN, "Jobs was our generation's Walt Disney." Steve Jobs revolutionized the devices that millions of people around the world use every single day. He was the creative force behind the Mac home computer, the iPod, the iPhone, and the iPad. His health had been poor for years. In 2003, he was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, and in 2009, he underwent a liver transplant. The exact cause of his death has not yet been announced, but his family says he died peacefully, surrounded by relatives.
Steve Jobs co-founded Apple in his parents' garage in 1976. He was in his early 20s. Over the next 35 years, he turned Apple into a household name. Today, it is worth more than any other technology company and is one of the most valuable brands on the planet. But his ill health cast a shadow over the last few years of his life, as CNN's Dan Simon now reports.
Today, Apple is going to reinvent the phone.
Steve Jobs was a modern-day Thomas Edison.
You can do multi-finger gestures on it, and boy, have we patented it.
He didn't have a patent on his own look, but he was rarely seen without tennis shoes, Levi's, and a black shirt. He was legendary for his flair and showmanship.
Amazing. And the screen literally floats in midair.
Stephen Paul Jobs was born in San Francisco. His mother, an unwed college student, put him up for adoption. He developed an early interest in computers, going to after-school lectures at Hewlett-Packard. After high school, he attended Reed College, but only for one semester. At just 20 years old, he started Apple Computer in his garage with friend Steve Wozniak.
We worked hard, and in 10 years, Apple had grown from just the two of us in a garage into a $2 billion company with over 4,000 employees.
That was Jobs in 2005, giving the commencement address at Stanford University.
You have to trust in something, your gut, destiny, life, karma, whatever, because believing that the dots will connect down the road will give you the confidence to follow your heart, even when it leads you off the well-worn path, and that will make all the difference.
In 1984, Apple introduced the machine that changed our lives forever, the Macintosh. Revolutionary because it made computers easier to use. It had a funny little thing called a mouse and allowed users to change fonts. But the Mac was expensive and sales were sluggish. In 1985, Steve Jobs was forced out of Apple, but it turned out he was just warming up.
I'm Buzz Lightyear, Space Ranger.
In 1986, he bought Pixar Animation Studios, which later produced hits like Toy Story. He also started a computer company called Next.
I hope you get a chance to look at this a little later. It's the most beautiful printed circuit board I've ever seen in my life.
The technology was so innovative that in a twist of fate, Apple bought Next, and Steve Jobs went back to work for the company he started. His second act considered one of the greatest CEO tenures of all time.
It's called the iPod Touch.
Who knew that a computer company would change how we listen to music? Steve Jobs introduced the iconic iPod,
Just slide it across, boom.
the iPhone, and later what some believe would be his grandest achievement, the iPad.
That's what it looks like. Very thin.
Apple dropped the computer from its name to reflect the company's expansion into consumer electronics.
Now, I'm going to take this morning and talk about the iPhone.
In recent years, Jobs no longer appeared his usual self. He was noticeably thin and frail, and investors and Apple faithful grew alarmed because of Jobs' past struggle with pancreatic cancer. In 2009, Jobs revealed he had a liver transplant after taking a 6-month leave of absence. But he returned to the stage with his usual vigor.
It is our new MacBook Air, and we think it's the future of notebooks.
Eventually, though, his struggle with ill health led him to step down as CEO. In a letter to the Apple board of directors, Jobs wrote, "I have always said if there ever came a day when I could no longer meet my duties and expectations as Apple CEO, I would be the first to let you know. Unfortunately, that day has come. I have made some of the best friends of my life at Apple," he added, "and I thank you for all the many years of being able to work alongside you." Steve Jobs' legacy can be found in his devices, long on aesthetics and attention to detail. He followed his heart, and with his technology,
We are calling it iPhone.
changed the world. Dan Simon, CNN, San Francisco.
A makeshift memorial is being set up outside the original Apple store in California for fans and mourners to lay flowers and pay their respects. Let's take a look at some of the impact Steve Jobs had on different people and places around the world. CNN's Alex Zolbert is live in Tokyo for us. Eunice Yoon is in Beijing, and Jim Bolden is outside the Apple store in central London. Alex, first, what sort of relationship have Japanese consumers got with the Apple brand?
Well, it is an interesting one because you have to keep in mind that basically Steve Jobs beat the Japanese at their own game, which is essentially creating tech products that we all use in our everyday lives. But, you know, respect is also very big here in Japan, and so a lot of the people we've spoke to today have a great deal of respect for Steve Jobs and the fact that, you know, he was able to create products that people relied on every day, all the products that we've been talking about today. Now, it's interesting that the store that we're standing out right here in Ginza in the heart of Tokyo is actually the first retail store that was opened outside the United States. That happened in 2003. And every day since then, this store has been crowded with people. In fact, when the store opened, the lines went for about 10 to 12 blocks just for people to see what this store was all about. And, you know, it really speaks to the fact that the Japanese have an appreciation for well-made products. And, you know, obviously Steve Jobs has capitalized on that. And another interesting point to make, after the tsunami here of March 11th, just 7 months ago, this became a focal point for people in Tokyo on that Friday evening when they couldn't get home. People saw this as a place where they could come and check their email and get in touch with their loved ones and let them know that they're okay and find out basically what's going on. So it's really seen as a center here in Tokyo.
Thanks, Alex. Eunice, Apple products are made in China, so what's going to be the impact on manufacturing?
Well, Zain, you know, you only have to look at the back of an iPod or an iPhone to really understand the close relationship that China has with Apple. If you take a look at any one of these things, you'll actually see the words designed in California, but assembled in China. And that's another way in which Steve Jobs was able to touch so many lives here beyond the consumer. There are so many factories here manufacturing lots of products for Apple, and those companies are employing hundreds of thousands of Chinese migrant workers. So the impact isn't only on the consumer side, but also on the manufacturing side. Zain?
Thanks, Eunice. Let's go to Jim, who's here in the UK, outside the Apple store in London. Jim, what's been the impact on young consumers here in London?
Well, certainly, of course, people here in the UK and London have embraced the products from Apple as much as they have anywhere else in the world. I've been to this store here on Regent Street on a number of occasions when new products were being launched, and you'd see queues around the block and people running into this store. This was, of course, the first store in Europe, and now there are many, many stores around Europe. I think one of the most interesting impacts, Zain, is really what's happened to European tech. There are a few companies like ARM based in Cambridge, England, that have benefited from Apple. Its chip designs have to go into a lot of Apple products, and its share price has gone higher and higher, as has Apple's. But many other companies, in fact, have suffered. Europe has not been able to keep up with the phenomena of Apple. And when it went into the phones, you see what happened, for instance, to a company like Nokia in Finland, who is suffering greatly, not able to keep up on the smartphone side of things. So the impact for Apple has been in Europe specifically, that people have been very happy to buy those products and leave European products on the side. Zain?
Jim Bolden outside the Apple store in central London, Eunice Yoon in Beijing, Alex Zolbert in Tokyo. Thanks, guys.
Well, as you can imagine, lots of people online are talking about Steve Jobs' death. Trendsmap.com monitors social media conversations around the world, and as you can see here, Steve Jobs is the most popular in Asia, in the Americas, in Africa, pretty much anywhere you look. That's what people are talking about. R.I.P. Rest in peace, Steve Jobs is the most used term on Twitter right now. There's also a lot of conversation around the hashtags "Thank you, Steve" and "ISAD." There is a tribute from the company Jobs co-founded on Apple.com. It says Jobs leaves behind a company that only he could have built. The firm has posted an email address remembering Steve at Apple.com for people who want to leave their messages and condolences. Other websites like Google and the popular tech blog Gizmodo have also paid tribute. And CNN reporters are sending in their thoughts through the Steve Jobs and You assignment page. That's at iReport at CNN.com. Longtime iReporter and cartoonist Brixton Doyle sent in this image saying, as you may have guessed, this was done entirely on a Mac. It says, in part to a man who has sown many seeds. Rest in peace, Steve. Zain.
Monita, stay with CNN. We're going to have more on Steve Jobs' life and legacy in the hours ahead.